The greatest advance paid for any book is $5 million for Whirlwind to James Clavell in 1986. Call me crazy, writer friends, but if you got an advance for $5 million for your next book, wouldn't you kind of stop writing after that book? One, because you don't actually have to write again, and also step aside, let some other writers in. Hi, I'm Stella and welcome to 30 Books, and I have been reading the Guinness Book of Records for 1988, full of wonderful facts and records broken around the 80s. And also, judging by the pictures, it was a time before women were invented as well. But we're not here to talk about world records. We're here to talk about women, of course, because this time around on 30 Books, I'm talking about Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, out by Fourth Estate, HarperCollins. It is a fiction book written in first person, and it is the story of, as the back of the blurb tells me, this is a novel about a woman called Martha, and she knows there is something wrong with her, but she doesn't know what it is. Now, very early on in the book, we learn that she has left her husband, or they have left each other. And Patrick, her husband, has always been in love with Martha, and he seems a man who is too good to be true. So what happened? What went wrong? And what is actually wrong with Martha? She knows that she doesn't want children, but this is the big question, why? And I feel like that's all I can say without giving too much away, except for the title, Sorrow and Bliss. Now, what is wrong with Martha actually causes this sorrow and bliss? She was brought up in a very kind of eccentric household. There is definitely something wrong with her mother. I'm not giving anything away. She was an alcoholic. Her father loved her mother very much and found it impossible to leave, but also at the same time to look after his two daughters' welfare. It's also a story about sister relationships as well, because Martha is extremely close to her sister Ingrid, who does want children and seems to be having one every year. And her mother, who is an eccentric artist type, has a sister who is definitely not an eccentric artist type, who is rich and incredibly uptight, and it's always about having the perfect Christmas. There's a lot of Christmases in here. There is a thing out there that when a book is written or narrated by a woman, and a complicated woman, like we all are, pretty much. Everyone is pretty complicated. Everyone has their faults. No one is perfect. Some people are more troubled than others. And then when this happens, it is often said, oh, but she was so self-indulgent and she was narcissistic. Well, one, that could be the point. And two, maybe pretend that narrator is a man and then see how far you get going. There seems to be this thing that female narrators have to be perfect. They have to be generous and kind and loving like all the time. But what kind of a book is that? Who wants to read that type of book? What woman doesn't want to see herself reflected back in the work? Even books like Bridget Jones's Diary, I've heard people say, well, she was so selfish. No, she absolutely wasn't. She was funny, but she was not selfish, and if she was, more power to her. So I'll just read this tiny bit here, which will sum up Martha quite well. Last year, I got glasses that I do not need because the optometrist fell off his rolling stool during the eye test. He looked so mortified, I started reading the letters wrongly on purpose. They are in the glove box, still in the bag. Now, does that sound like someone who is kind of self-absorbed? Well, no, because she is feeling for people like the optometrist, you know, and so she went to that length for someone else. I could not put this book down. I thought it was fantastic. The writing is brilliant. Look, it says at the top here, one of the reviews, as devastating and sharply witty as Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Fleabag. Now, I feel like that's a bit of a furphy. Now, I've watched all of Fleabag and I loved it, but this is not Fleabag. But I can see why they make the comparison, so please do not let that put you off unless you kind of go, look, I love Fleabag, I'm going to read this. It is very different. It's not Fleabag. One gripe, I thought it could have been about 5,000 words shorter. However, saying that, another gripe of mine, and it's kind of a big one, there's fat phobia in here, and it's very intentional, one of them, when she describes her mother and the way her mother's body changes, and a couple of them are very casually thrown in. Now, writers, when you are describing a person that is not nice, being fat is actually not a character flaw. You cannot just, you know, say that horrible people are either disfigured or fat. That is not a thing to do anymore. It was almost a deal breaker, and every time I read it, I just kind of thought, yeah, not so great about that. A lot of people may not notice it. I certainly do. And it also sets up the fact that, like, you've got your fat people who get described and no one else gets described physically. So there was that. However, this is such a fantastic book. It is a very compassionate book. It is funny. There were a couple of pockets where I laughed out loud, and I don't normally do that. And as I said, couldn't put it down. Now, I got my copy from the Hill of Content in Melbourne. Fantastic, gorgeous bookshop, and so good to go walk into a bookshop again. And it was for $32.99. So I think the writer gets about $3 for her royalties. However, it was such a good book, I'm actually going to add another $3 in, and got some, and what can a writer buy for $6? Blue cheese. And I also threw some crackers in as well, so I can eat the blue cheese. Well, the writer can eat the blue cheese, eat some crackers, get fat, hopefully, you know, nothing wrong with food, and write another book, because I cannot wait for Meg Mason's next book. And that is your 30 books for this time around. Love to hear your comments. What do you think of female narrators? What kind of gets on your wick from otherwise fantastic books? And I'll see you next time.